Julianne Bond, and this is 10 Minutes of Bonding. My guest today is Danielle Mason. Danielle is an ICU nurse here in New York City. Danielle, welcome to 10 Minutes of Bonding, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to speak with me today.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to see you again, Julianne.
Yeah, I know. One day we'll see each other again in person, but right now we're seeing each other. So I guess we should start with this. How long have you been an ICU nurse?
I've been in the ICU for 17 years, since 2003. So it's coming up really on my 17th year anniversary in a couple months.
And what was there something that drew you to wanting to be an ICU nurse? Did you do different kind of nursing before that, or?
Yeah, I did multiple different types of nursing. I became a nurse essentially like right out of high school, went through a very rapid sort of local nursing program and got my RN, and then kind of stumbled around through different jobs. I kind of didn't want to be a nurse at first. But as I started getting more into, the technicalities of like sort of the pathophysiology, the nuts and bolts of how you think like a nurse, and all those interesting things or things that I find so interesting, it sort of led me to get a job that was more increasingly technical. So then I was working. I ended up in New York City. I was working in sort of just a general hospital floor, and the nurses that I admired the most were going into the ICU. So I decided to follow suit, and that led me to the ICU that I work at now in 2003. And it was like, ticking all the boxes of the things that kept my mind stimulated at work. So that's how I ended up there.
And
I've never had any other job, so I don't even know. It's like, it's really all I've ever done. So this checks all those boxes.
Oh, that's interesting. So you've always been a nurse in your career life, but was the move into being an ICU nurse that really changed how you felt about what you were doing, it sounds like?
Sure. Oh my gosh, 100%, 100%. It's like learning a new language, It was amazing. So yeah, I've always been incredibly stimulated by work, and it's been so interesting through the years.
Yeah. So what is life like now being an ICU nurse in this time? What does your work life look like?
What time is it? No, I'm kidding. It is the COVID crisis.
The COVID crisis.
It is, it has changed everything. So the benefit of my sort of perspective on nursing has always been from the medical ICU standpoint. So you have patients with pneumonia and different kind of severe infections and heart attacks and things like that require intensive life support. So I'm used to that aspect. But the volume and the sheer tragedy of what the hospitals have seen in the last 2 months on the onslaught of this pandemic has changed everything. We've moved the actual physical unit that I've been on, just the 4 walls that I've worked on. We've been completely uprooted from there, have had to go build other ICUs on different floors throughout my hospital. The amount of patients that are requiring life support has increased, 10, 20 fold. And we've had to introduce, pool staff members out of other units. So really this huge group effort where you're not sort of in this insulated or intense sort of ICU, it's everywhere. So that it's changed everything. The speed with which you work, your resources, everything, and then COVID has all of these very specific symptoms that we manage. So you're also learning all these new things kind of in real time. So it's been tragic, but it's been fascinating for someone that does what I do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So being an ICU nurse, you're used to things being pretty crazy sometimes, I'm sure.
Sometimes,
right? Yeah, dealing with very sick people, but I guess I'm wondering if there are aspects of this particular time or the way that this has to be handled from a medical standpoint that is changing for you the actual experience of caring for your patients. Are there things that can't happen now, for example, that could before? Or I'm just curious about the sort of the, I understand the numbers are so much greater. I
Mhm.
also wonder though if there aren't things kind of within that that are challenging.
Yes, there's a limited number of people that can be at the bedside. So essentially, it's the nurse all day. We are at the bedside all day. And then you have the respiratory therapists that come in and out that manage, the oxygen delivery and all the different devices surrounding that. And then you have the doctors, but the doctors are not at the bedside as much. There was certainly a time where we could be like, "Hey, come in the room," but they are kind of spread very thin. So the nurse is really the only person that's at the bedside all day. And then, and as far as the patient's perspective, we don't allow visitors. We haven't allowed visitors now for months because of the chance of them being exposed to COVID or spreading it, or certainly them, the family members oftentimes have COVID, so we can't be exposed to them. So there's been no visitation. And these patients, the ones that I take care of, are the sickest of the sick. So that has been the tragedy on top of the tragedy. That these families are already going through, that they can't be with their loved ones during this time. And there's very limited contact with the staff as well. So that's been incredibly challenging to deal with, just on
Yeah.
a personal level, knowing that you're watching this happen, and they don't get to have their family members around them.
And challenging, I would think, just as a person.
A human's perspective. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This is not my uncle in the bed or my husband or my brother. This is you should be here. And people want to be there and they just can't. So we've had to, kind of fill in you can't fill in, there's no filling in, but we've had to be the lifeline to the family as well, under very, again, limited circumstances, because we spend so much time at the ICU level with the actual patient. You can't really leave these patients for long at all. Like physically, you never leave them. You're there throughout the whole shift, but you can't even walk away sometimes because they require such an intense level of care. But we try to reach out. The doctors have been great about doing like daily phone calls. And I know that there's a interdisciplinary effort, especially now that we've kind of gotten on top of it a little bit, to really involve the families more, like FaceTime calls and a set of staff that's really just there to communicate with families. But it doesn't replace actually being there.
No.
It's traumatic times 10 for everyone involved, and even more, and even for the staff, because we know this is not the way it's meant to be.
Right. So
Yeah.
what do you think this will, if you could predict what the future of your work is going to look like? I mean, maybe that's hard to do, but I'm just curious how as you're watching this play out and going through it in real time, do you have a sense of that, what the future might look like for your work?
For my specific specialty, I don't really know. I mean, we're always going to have to be cautious and ultra prepared, and for dealing with this very contagious COVID population, which I now think we have a lot of those tools in place systematically, which we just kind of had to build in real time. Moving forward with the amount of information we've gained and how we've actually seen how we can adapt to these practices. I think that we've learned a lot. And, in the distant future, I think it's an exciting time, not exciting in the sense that it's a happy excitement. It's an exciting time for just the advancement of, how we care for, and the efficiency with which we care for patients that are critically ill, to the level that we've seen a lot of these COVID patients. We've learned so much, adopted new practices, pulled from teams that would never have had to work together before. And moving forward as a system, as a hospital system, and as a nurse, knowing that we can all sort of work together this way is very exciting. We're rewriting, the rule books, the policy books, probably as I speak. Because this crisis has really shown us how the hospital can change very rapidly, and still make it work. Just an example of like taking a regular hospital floor, making it into an ICU. Those processes usually take months to a year to happen. And we kind of converted most of my hospital into an ICU in 2 weeks. So the amount of resources that were pooled and the working together and things like that, and then all of the things that we learned, how can we streamline all these processes, was kind of discovered in real time. So it's really exciting to see this change in how we've been able to make all these things happen, because despite all the tragedy, I also work at a hospital that, and many other hospitals are celebrating their 1,000th COVID discharge. People are going home, they are getting better. And we're seeing the hospital admissions decline, probably from social distancing and more testing. Obviously, all that can be done better, but we're all learning in real time. And that's the truth for inside of the hospital as well. So I would like to think it's an exciting time, but change is not always comfortable, but I can see what we've been able to accomplish in a very short period of time.
Thanks. That's amazing and heartening to hear that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I'd like to just shift in this moment that we have left to focus on you. So, because you take care of other people all the time, how are you taking care of yourself? Specifically, the question I always ask everyone is, in these times, most of us are looking for comfort and inspiration, and that's different for everybody. So I'm wondering for you, what's giving you comfort and or inspiration these days?
It's the most simple thing. It's really, and it's probably kind of corny, but it's really just like other people, because even though we can't be together and, I'm practicing social distancing other than, going to work or going to the market, just like everyone else. It's the people in my life, my emotional support system, my old friends, my new friends, my distant friends, my family, like just being able to talk with them, like technology, in short, technology. I'm able to do FaceTime calls. We're doing game night. We're spending hours on the phone like we were when we were teenagers, because we all have the time. Some of us more than others, because everybody's also stuck home with their kids and I don't have any. So I certainly have a little bit more free time than some when I'm not working. But people, I have been so inspired and uplifted by packages I've received in the mail and outreach. My mom's been great. My family, my brother, my sister-in-law, and this myriad of all these people that I've had in my life, some of since childhood. It's like we are just constantly connected. And then I have new friends, and it's just amazing some of the interesting people that I've sort of attracted during this time. And it's nice how you sort of, if you're just kind of in a more positive sort of space, how you sort of attract that as well. So I've had some great people that have just, come around and just shown up, because this is a worldwide issue. This is not something that's sort of just happening in New York. But even when it was just kind of happening in New York, I started getting phone calls and texts and messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. So that's what's keeping me together, other people. And I was someone that really never considered myself that dependent. I certainly like to go out, but I'm not a social butterfly. But now it's like technology has kept me sane.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's how I'm taking care of myself. I'm reaching out. I'm sort of saying like, I'm accepting the love that's being given to me, and in a short, so that's been really, really special.
That's great.
Yeah.
And thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And thanks to everyone for joining us on 10 Minutes of Bonding. I'll be back next week with my next guest. In the meantime, take care and stay safe. Danielle, thank you again. And
thank you.
You take care and you stay safe.
I will. Thank you so much.